All right, good morning, everybody. We are in uncharted territory. Speaker of the House has been removed. And y'all, this is one I'm not entirely sure what I think about it yet. We're gonna read some articles and I'm gonna think out loud. We're gonna see what we come up with. So let's buckle in and do this. Good morning. All right. Ooh, that might be a little too tight on the old fat man. Let's back it up a hair there. That's a better frame. Okay, how we doing? Good morning. So, uncharted territory, unprecedented. Never had a speaker removed before. This is akin to the British vote of no confidence. The speaker position has been vacated. Now, as I've reminded you several times, we were pretty hard on, excuse me, we were pretty hard on old McCarthy when he was running for the speakership, and got a good chuckle out of the myriad number, I think it was 15 votes that he failed to win. But in order to secure his victory and get the vote, he agreed to some provisions that personally I was pretty happy with, most of which were put to him by people like Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene. I'm a little surprised to see that MTG was not one of the 8 Republicans who voted to oust McCarthy. And I'm curious as to why exactly, how exactly that shook out. So we'll start with this article from the AP. Kevin McCarthy out as House Speaker. Here's what's next. The House of Representatives is entering uncharted territory after a far-right effort to remove fellow Republican Kevin McCarthy from the speakership succeeded thanks to support from Democrats. Now, that language, they just love that language. They just love it. Far-right effort to remove fellow Republican Kevin McCarthy. Far-right effort. Like I said, MTG was not one that crossed the aisle to vote here. There's no Ted Cruz here. I see 8 Republicans, and frankly, I've heard of one of them. Okay, 2. I know who Nancy Mace is, but, you know, you got Matt Gaetz, Nancy Mace, Andy Biggs, Matt Rosendale, Ellie Crane, Ken Buck. Okay, I've heard of Ken Buck. That's good. Bob Good and Tim Burchett. But apart from Matt Gaetz and to a lesser degree Nancy Mace, these are all pretty much lesser known Republican representatives. Gaetz just Gaetz is the only shining star in there. Zandermack says because this is purely a fundraiser for Gaetz and MTG doesn't need the money. I think I'm gonna have to push back a little on that. I think Gaetz is trying to make a significant maneuver here. I don't know that it'll be successful. And off the rip, I think that the mere fact that they had to use basically the entire Democrat Party to get this done, they had to get all of the Democrats on board to get this done, and they did. I mean, obviously, the major motive, the obvious primary motivation there for the Democrats is let's get the Republican. It could have been anybody. Hell, it could have been Mitt Romney. And no, Democrats wouldn't go against Romney. He's their guy. But basically, any Republican short of Mitt Romney, and the Democrats would have been on board. And exactly the point I'm making, Xander Mack. 3% of Republicans voted with 100% of Democrats. That statistic should speak volumes. And it does. But like I was saying yesterday, the Republican Party, the elected body of the Republican Party, is such an inadequate and imperfect champion that I really have some mixed feelings and am having a hard time, frankly, with my strategic analysis on this one, because our Republican Party, our Republican representatives have been so inadequate to the task that we require of them, which is to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States, that for them to do nothing on anything is nearly an endorsement of the action. For a Democrat to believe a thing is nearly to guarantee the counterfactuality of that premise, whatever it is, right? Frankly, the claims of the left of late, especially those related directly to science and medicine, have been so outlandish and so unfounded that if Joe Biden were to tell me the sky is blue, I would be morally bound to argue it. Because it's not intelligent or reasonable or morally tolerable to accept anything that one of them should say on face value. And so the support of the Democrat for the ouster of McCarthy makes the maneuver suspicious on its face. However, the failure of Republicans to bolster against such an action almost by itself makes the action credible. At least gives it merit. And 8 Republicans breaking ranks to go and get it done. I want to believe that there are good Republicans, that we have elected good Republicans. Right? There's no evidence that we've elected good Democrats. Not a shred. And there's plenty of evidence to support the claim that Democrats are just pure, unadulterated evil. That the interest of the party is the demise of the nation. With Republicans, there's there's no great evidence to support the actual moral character of the individual politicians. But there's no substantial evidence other than the absence of action, other than their integral inadequacy, to suggest that they're strictly good or that they're even mediocre in their morality. And this concerns me incredibly deeply. I was always suspicious, and have said as much on many occasions, of McCarthy generally. But he was ostensibly a Republican. And he did put a good face on a lot of his arguments. He gave us a lot of great kind of clickbait sound bites where he seemed to legitimately be in opposition to the Democrats, which, he's a California Republican, so for him to seem to be in opposition to Democrats could very much smell like a controlled opposition bit, which also is a thing that has given me concern in the past. Now, Zandermack says, we know Gaetz is full of it because he got everything he wanted in the first continuing resolution, including spending cuts, and scuttled it for personal gain. I'll almost grant you that, except for ostensibly Gaetz is pulling this end run based on McCarthy trying to make a deal to continue Ukrainian funding. And I cannot overstate the importance of shutting down funding to Ukraine. Yes. Xander says, you have to grant me that because it's a fact. True story. True facts. There you go. Yes, it is a fact. He got everything he wanted in the first continuing resolution, including spending cuts and scuttled it for personal gain. The and scuttled it for personal gain bit is opinion, and here's where I can push back on the opinion a little bit, is precisely the question of the Ukraine funding. The concern is that right now we've funneled over $100 billion into Ukraine. We're sending them military equipment, which we were told was not going to happen. We're putting troops on the ground, which we were told was not going to happen. The Biden administration is working tirelessly, day and night, to not only start, but to guarantee our involvement in World War III, for no reason other than to expand the money laundering empire of the Democrat National Committee. One cannot even make the argument that the interest is for national security because we're overextending ourselves into an additional front of combat. And one cannot make the argument that it is an economic strategic move, because it was, in fact, the intentional sabotage and collapse of the American energy industry by the Biden administration that was the primary vessel of funding to allow Russia to begin making the moves on Ukraine, which it did not, I might add, begin to make until Biden's ally Zelensky in Ukraine, with whom there has clearly been a tide of corruption between Burisma and the prosecutor, is it Luchevsky? The Russians did not make a move on the Ukraine until Zelensky went and poked the old bear and started playing his fence sit games with, well, maybe I'll you in, maybe I won't you in. You in, don't you in, you in, don't you in. Frankly, the whole Ukraine-Russia relationship is an obnoxious little brother buzzing around his big brother who's trying to do his homework and get ready for school in the morning, and the little brother's buzzing around and poking him with a Nerf sword, and big brother finally just smacks him back. Okay, maybe mommy and daddy need to say, don't hit your brother. But hey, little guy, you were kind of asking for it, right? Don't ever forget that there are no good guys in the Ukraine situation. Alex says, please. Plus, he just kneecapped the GOP's most successful fundraiser, and anyone that thinks that's not going to hurt in 2024 is simply wrong. You are correct there. And that's the thing that bothers me the most about this is the timing of it. The last thing we need going into an election that's already being rigged and interfered with by the Democrats is internecine fighting between factions within the Republican Party. And so I'm not looking forward to how the fallout from this affects Trump's chances going forward into November. That's going to be a little tricky, a little complicated. Thankfully, that's not this November, right? Thankfully, we've got a year to get past this. It's still going to be a pain in the ass. It's still going to be part of the news cycle. It's still going to be part of the conversation. But we do have a year to get past it. And if anybody suspects that Joe Biden can make it another year without either dying of old age or peeing on another pope, then I think we're going to be good there. Okay, now, Alex, you might as well just call in, man, because you're killing it here. Now, the impeachment inquiry is at risk. The committees looking at Hunter Biden are at risk. Everything is currently at risk. You're not wrong, and that is something worth worrying about. And let me be frank, when it comes down to it, if the impeachment inquiry doesn't get anywhere, if Hunter Biden doesn't end up in jail next to his father, those are lines of attack that are going to be used to take Gaetz down the next time he's running for re-election. He will have to deal with that docket being called due. So let's go back to the article for a minute. A resolution titled "A Motion to Vacate" from Rep. Matt Gaetz, representative from Florida, Republican from Florida, passed Tuesday with the support of 8 Republicans and all the Democrats present and voting. The vote made McCarthy the first speaker in history to be removed from office, a bitter humiliation that came after less than 9 months on the job. The California Republican told his conference shortly after that he would not run for the job again. It is a stunning outcome in the House that shocked lawmakers of both parties and left them wondering what the future will bring. Now, I would also like to bring up that this is another chain in the pattern of weaponizing political mechanisms. Not unlike the several impeachment attempts against Donald Trump that failed. He was impeached by the House and then acquitted by the Senate, which is an important fact of the matter. Much like Bill Clinton was actually impeached. But in the case of the Speaker and the motion to vacate, this is actually purely political. He was vacated based on political objectives. The only accusations here were that he was not doing politically what certain people wanted, in this case, a shitload of Democrats and Matt Gaetz and a handful of other Republicans you've never heard of. So let's not forget that McCarthy was not accused of a crime, right? It's not like It's not like they came out with a bunch of fabricated evidence and tried to pretend like he had some long-running homoerotic relationship with Vladimir Putin. And instead, the argument was made based purely on political posturing and positioning. And that by itself raises some concern. But it also raises some interesting opportunities. We vote for politicians. And we only get to vote for them every 4, 6, some 2, every few years. And once you've voted and hired a person to fill that position, you're stuck with them for the term. There are technically mechanisms for removal, but they go almost entirely unused, no matter how incompetent the politician turns out to be. Take my representative here, for example, Hank Johnson. Hank Johnson's been sitting in that chair for a long, long time, and he's dumb as a box of rocks. Now, I don't know that I could point to any particular crime that he's committed, but holy Christ, has he done nothing? I mean, it is difficult to imagine having a less valuable person in that position without him actively causing harm, which I could probably make a pretty good case for by merely driving through most of Decatur. So, while there are mechanisms to remove someone after they've been elected, they go almost entirely unused. And even when they are used, there'll be things like, there was a recall on Gavin Newsom, and he won that recall election. So that's one mechanism. I don't think, and I may have to do a little reading on this, I don't think there is an equivalent action that can be taken to actually remove somebody from their position as a House representative. Pitt Danny asks, who was McCarthy covering for? I don't know. Waller asks, was he being held accountable for the promises he made when trying to become speaker? So that's a good question. It sounds to me like primarily Gaetz is if you ignore the speculation about Gaetz just trying to fundraise, which I'm not totally disinclined to agree with, but ignoring that for a moment, it seems to me like the primary complaint is the inclusion of the Ukrainian funding in the continuing resolution. So the positive, I suppose, we could take here, going forward, we can point to the Democrats' support of McCarthy's ouster as Democrats supporting Matt Gaetz in blocking Ukrainian funding. That's a bit of a stretch. That is a bit of a stretch, but it is a fact that, at least to some extent, the entire Democrat side of the House just voted in support of a motion to deny funding to the Ukraine. On the other side of that, I want you guys to realize that means that the entire Republican side of the House also just voted to fund Ukraine. Now, that is an oversimplification. It really is. But when you're talking about politics and political strategy, most of what happens beyond the oversimplification has to do with individual agendas and not the totality of the strategy. That's one of the things that makes politics so muddy and so hard to put your head around, is that you know, probably one of the easiest examples to look at was the campaign to make seatbelt adoption a state level compulsory law, where the adoption of the law by the state was tied directly to federal highway funding. If the state refused to enforce the federally suggested, federally recommended seatbelt law, then they would be denied highway funding. The same way we got the 21-year-old age limit for alcohol. And those are hard to think about because I generally oppose any affirmative activity enforced by law, right? Law should only ever be thou shalt not. And thou shalt not do X without Y sounds a hell of a lot like thou shalt Y. But it's not quite the same. Like I've said before, the difference between Obamacare and compulsory car insurance is, of course, with the Obamacare thing, you were forced just because you're alive to pay for health insurance. While with a car, having car insurance, you don't have to have car insurance if you don't drive the car on public roads or even own a car, in fact. And I agree that wearing a seatbelt is a good idea, but I agree that wearing a seatbelt is a good idea is a very different statement from I agree that everybody should be forced at gunpoint to wear a seatbelt. Right? Like, I agree that getting married and having kids is a good idea. I don't accept that means we should force everybody at shotgun point to get married and have kids. In fact, there's a lot of people out there I'd rather see not get married and have kids. For most of us, it's a good idea. But that in no way endorses government enforcement of the good idea. So, like I said, this is muddy politics shit that's hard to get the head around. But just looking at the parties involved and the way that they fall out, the way that they break out, it smells a hell of a lot like you've got 7 relatively no-name Republicans and one Matt Gaetz, plus all of the Democrats versus the Republicans. And I'm tempted to say that just based on the characters involved, it sounds like McCarthy's not the man for the job, but his removal under these circumstances benefits the enemy more than it does the nation. And so I find the whole thing at least somewhat dubious. So, for any of you that think this is a big win, I definitely tell you to temper that expectation. But for any of you that are dedicated to the idea that this is a crushing defeat, I would also say that you should temper that expectation. And yeah, that's exactly where I was about to get to. Xander Mack now asks, the big question now is who's going to do the job, and that's where I was going with that. So the Democrats supporting the removal of McCarthy, you have to wonder what they know that we don't. And part of that is they must have at least some inkling of who's going to fill that spot. Hell, I'd love to see Jordan Peterson get pulled in to be the Speaker of the House. And just, what's the American foreign policy position? That's easy. It's clean your goddamn room. Go make your bed, brush your teeth, and clean your own fucking room. And eat lobster. So I'm going to go ahead and put a pin in it right there. And yes, guys, I know you're not talking about Jordan Peterson. I saw the name Jordan and I thought the joke would be fun. Y'all be safe out there. We love you, and we will see you tomorrow.